So for those of us who are just joining, congratulations, you're very early. So we'll give everyone else a few more minutes to join in. So make sure you have a delicious beverage. I myself are enjoying some Toronto tap water. So grab a beverage and we'll get started in a few minutes. So for folks online who are just waiting for us to get started, usually I have a list of hilarious yet tasteful jokes that I would share while we wait for folks to join in the webinar. But sadly, I seem to have misplaced my joke sheet. So alas, today you won't be able to hear the phenomenal comedy hour that I had planned for you, but we will get started in another minute or two. Okay, so it is 1:30 Eastern Standard Time, right on the dot. I always like to be super respectful of everyone's time, so I like to get started sort of right when we say we're going to get started. So let's jump in. So welcome, good afternoon to those of us on the East Coast. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast. And thank you so much for joining us for this short and snappy, as we like to call them, 30-minute webinars on tips from banks and credit unions on how to use customer engagement technology. And I am joining you today from the beautiful Coconut office here in Toronto, Ontario, where I am absolutely thrilled to be having a break from my family. I think one of the things that I've really realized is I can't miss them if they never go away. So it's lovely to be here hosting a webinar, coming down to our office downtown. So thank you everyone for giving me that justification to do so. So as we power through this content, feel free to add any questions that you may have into the chat box. We should have some time at the end to be able to answer them. So please jot them down. If you prefer to reach out to either Stephen or myself afterwards, then absolutely we can do so. So let's jump right in. So a couple of introductions. So my name is Alyssa Riddell. I'm part of the marketing team here at Coconut Software. So I spend a lot of time chatting with banks and credit unions, looking at patterns and trends in the industry so that we can create valuable content like this webinar that's helpful to financial institutions and their leaders like yourself. And so Stephen, who's also on the line and hopefully going to be showing his beautiful face shortly, is on the executive account team. And he is also one of our ever-growing sales team that happens to also come from Ireland. So as soon as you start hearing him talk, you'll see that beautiful brogue. So he's been working for us for about 2.5 years, and he assists our customers prior to implementation. And as a result, he really has his ear to the ground with regards to what financial institutions are planning, what's working well, as well as some of the engagement challenges. So it's great to have him on the line. So what is customer engagement tech and why is it actually needed? So really much of our world treats individuals like numbers with minimal concern for the person behind those digits. And all consumers, not just in the financial space, want to spend their limited time on the people, the experiences, and the things that we actually find to be valuable. And financial institutions, credit unions, banks really have to demonstrate their value for their customers and members by personalizing engagements and interactions in order to build those deeper connections. And so no matter how quickly we're being forced into digital transformation, thanks to COVID-19, amongst other things, we really are also feeling pressure from using apps, various CRMs, online banking. We really can't afford to forget that people need to feel valued in order to keep them as loyal members and as loyal customers. And so that's exactly what this customer engagement tech is and what it does. It really makes it easier to quickly set up ways for your staff to connect with their members, their prospective customers, their prospective members, and even prospective employees. And ideally, that same tech should be able to serve up an experience that's similar and easy across all of the various channels, whether it's your website, your mobile app, your branches, your video appointments. And so banks and credit unions are now in the throes of digital transformation. We all know this. And often we hear the Coconut side of things, that leaders are trying to work out what the future of their branch network is actually going to look like, and then how to appropriately staff with all the changes in capacity and the labor shortages that we're experiencing. And so we really need to have a simple experience across all of the channels, regardless of where your members or your customers are starting that journey, if it's digital or if it's in person. And so your customers and members are wanting to complete their transactions and get advice in a way that is convenient for them. I would say gone are the days when everyone visited their local branch before 5 p.m. on a weekday, and instead the pendulum's now shifting and swinging towards more that digital only experience, which is being touted by the neobanks. But what we found in our research is that members and customers want to be met somewhere in the middle, somewhere along that spectrum. And they need to be encouraged to use those digital options when it's low value transactions that can be completed digitally. So like depositing a check, very easy to take a picture in a mobile app and have that be sent through, but then welcomed into their local branch when advisory or life milestone discussions need to happen. But in some other research that we found was PricewaterhouseCoopers did a study that said 59% of all consumers feel that companies have actually lost touch with that human element of the member or customer experience. And so the graphic on the screen shows the human digital interaction spectrum. So your members and customers are going to want to move between both extremes, going into bricks and mortar versus the digital only. And as financial institution leaders, you also want to encourage certain behaviors to happen versus in person versus digital, because it also has cost implications on your bottom line. So we can't just all go digital and we can't just all be in branch, because when you focus on one, you're naturally leaving the other behind. You really do need that holistic approach. And that's challenging because credit unions and banks are experiencing app fatigue. They're having to deal with legacy systems as well. And so physical branches and the personal interactions that they facilitate are very important for large and complex banking transactions. So taking out a loan, winning the lottery and trying to figure out what to do with those winnings. On the other hand, many members and customers are now doing a lot of the smaller transactions like checking their balance, making deposits, using ATMs, using drive-through services, and using banking apps. And so it's imperative for leaders like yourself to know when to automate and to know when to humanize those interactions. So the suggestion is you need to match the level of support that you provide with the level of complexity for that request. Don't make opening a checking account more difficult than it needs to be, and see if you can support that activity through a cheaper channel like a website. That way, you can focus your highly trained, highly engaged, highly paid in-person advisors to do that consultative type of support. So customer and member expectations really have become, I want to bank how I want to bank. And your customers and members are bristling when they're being forced to do things that aren't convenient or their first choice. So a small example, my husband and I, we had to renegotiate our mortgage, and our bank was not able to do that over the phone for us. We had to mask up, we had to get our kids a babysitter, we had to take time out of our schedules to go down to the branch to facilitate this experience. And it really was quite off-putting. If they, like myself, aren't getting what they need, these folks are going to be willing to move to other institutions. And so we've actually found a recent survey, 27% of financial institution customers are planning to leave their primary bank or credit union this year. So we're seeing evidence that people prefer to kickstart their search for an answer to a question by calling in, by visiting your website, by opening up the mobile app, or responding to an email from a staff member. And the question then becomes, how can we make it more convenient, make it as convenient as possible for these customers and members to complete those activities quickly? And the answer, of course, is consumer engagement tech. And so the chart that's on your screen there was created from a report that we commissioned through Future Branches. And essentially it's showcasing that the majority of individuals prefer a digital experience through a mobile app. But the other thing that's important to note along the bottom there, 71% of the respondents of that survey believe it's still important to build a relationship with their credit union's personnel. So whether you do that virtually from afar or in branch, you have to match the digital with the in-person, with the human part of it. Okay, and now Stephen's actually going to walk us through why now is the time that we need to start really changing. Stephen?
Perfect. Thank you for that, Eli, and for the lovely introduction at the start, of course. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. It's great to see so many familiar faces, or familiar names, I should say, in the attendee list, including some people that I've spoken to already who are probably very sick of hearing my voice. So good to speak to you again. So I'm going to continue on this talk track before getting into the 5 top tips from our current customers. So let's get into this opening slide, because for me, it's quite important, but it's also a bit lengthy. So hopefully you can stay with me here. So as we can see from the title of this slide, the time for change is now. So sometimes when speaking with credit unions and banks, I hear executives say, our customers don't do things this way or that, or even our members wouldn't like to utilize X or Y. At Coconut, our customers are always surprised when they launch Coconut to see through our insights and reporting how their members and customers actually engage. For example, our customers that offer phone and branch appointments find that on average of 50% of appointments are actually for virtual meeting methods as opposed to in-branch engagements, which is oftentimes a bit of a surprise for them. So this leads us on to number 2 here, and the question of how well do you actually understand your customer or member base? And what we've learned that is understanding, confirming, and reaffirming with your customers and their needs in today's banking environment is absolutely essential as expectations continue to change kind of with the speed of the technological advancements today and the time of now. So there's no denying that these expectations are driving branch restructuring initiatives, staff capacity planning, and the role that bricks and mortar play in the modern customer journey. And then added to this is a threat of digital banks, like Eli mentioned already, as well as maybe some non-traditional competitors like Apple, Google, and others that are finding themselves increasingly involved in transactions, particularly with reduction of cash as a result of the pandemic. So it's important that financial institutions need to find efficiencies that reduce costs. And one of the ways our customers benefit from a solution like Coconut is reducing the amount of time staff spend on manual entry, organizing meetings, or trying to reach prospects, for example. This means more time can be spent with customers and revenue generating activities. So branch leadership harness the time saved, as well as insights gained from our reporting capabilities to ensure that they have the right staff in the right place at the right time. So outside of those non-traditional competition that I mentioned, like those technology companies, take a look at some of your traditional competitors in your market, and you'll mostly see that a lot of them are increasing investments in digital experiences, which we'll touch upon in a few moments. So it is really vital that you don't get left behind. Make sure you're evaluating all avenues by which a prospect could engage with you and your institution. So things like blog posts, email campaigns, your website, advisor newsletters, in-branch posters, out-of-home advertisements, and basically any other channel you can think of. If you have clear calls to action and easy paths by which to engage with your staff, you're not only optimizing your marketing, you're also not going to be losing out on prospects. So just to emphasize our last point, I want to present this stat published by the Financial Brand in a report about experience trends last year. In the past, customer experience was almost a bit of an afterthought of banking strategies, but now customer experience has become one of the primary drivers and differentiators among financial institutions. And we would challenge you to think about your own digital experience and what you've changed over the past 9 months. And I hope that, and I know that some of them aren't, but I hope that most people on the line today are not in the 25%. So you may also be listening to this presentation, this webinar today, and hearing so much about investing in customer experiences and you're thinking, why does this actually matter? We've got such bigger things to worry about that actually affect our bottom line than experiences. So why does customer experience and customer engagement actually work? It works because it makes your customers feel appreciated and valued, which have been proven to directly impact customer acquisition, loyalty, and drive share of wallet. In another Forrester study, and you'll hear us quoting lots of studies today because we did our research, they found that revenue impact of a 1-point improvement in CX index score, which is a measure of how successfully a company delivers customer experiences that create and sustain loyalty, results in an $8.19 per customer of annual incremental revenue for multi-channel banks. So with direct and measurable results of engagement leading to loyalty and share of wallet, any financial institution looking to gain and retain customers in a swiftly changing environment must evaluate whether they have the technology stack and the internal resources to support their member and customer engagement experiences. So also as a vendor working directly with financial institutions, we have the benefit and luxury of regularly speaking with banks and credit unions of all sizes and finding out what's working for them, some of the lessons they've learned, so we can improve not only our own offering, but also share these learnings with all you wonderful folks in the line today. So we've got 5 tips we want to share with you, and let's get into tip number 1. I know some people have heard me speak about this, and apologies if this is a bit of repetition, but for those who haven't, this may be a bit of a breath of fresh air, so to speak. And this isn't exactly rocket surgery either. But it's important that you make it as easy as possible for your customers to access staff and services at your financial institution, but also make it as easy as possible for your staff to provide these services. So we often hear about customer experience, but maybe not so much about staff experiences. So it's important to think about both of them. And I think this is one of the reasons that we succeed as a company. And I'm proud that we've helped Rogue and their members and many other credit unions and banks remove friction points across all of their channels and ease access to financial services. So with that, I'll hand over to Eli, who's going to talk to tip number 2.
Perfect. Thank you. So tip number 2, find the right partner. So we often hear from financial institutions that finding the right vendor to match their priorities, their sense of urgency, their cultural values is absolutely essential for a smooth tech implementation, but more importantly, for strong ongoing relationship. So TCU Financial Group recommends that you look for a partner that's going to work with you and your team to get you the support that you need, but also one that's open to receiving feedback on how to make the solution better. So when you're looking at other vendors or other solutions, make sure that you're asking for references, for case studies, talking to your network about the options that are available to you. Ask for the actual game plans for implementing, for internal training, for the ongoing support models. And of course, evaluate the perennial, should we build it versus should we buy it, consideration to really determine what makes sense the most for your budget, for your timelines, and for your desire for control. And so one of the things we actually do have, I'm just going to pop it into the chat right there. So we do have a build versus buy resource that you're encouraged to download if you're kind of having those conversations internally, as well as there's a link to some of the case studies that we mentioned here. So the conversations and engagements that you have with that vendor through the sales process is generally a pretty good litmus test as to how that vendor is going to engage with your team in the future. Right, Stephen, tip number 3.
Thanks, Eli. I particularly like that one about finding the right vendor, and that last point about how I suppose the vendor interacts with you throughout the sales process. Sometimes I hear feedback from customers about other vendors who will remain nameless, about people not responding to emails, they having to follow up with them, with that salesperson, whoever it may be. And thankfully for those in the line who's ever engaged with me, you know that I'm usually the one who's annoying you. So I like that one. Okay, so tip number 3. This one is something that comes up quite frequently with customers. So when we start to get into conversations around implementing Coconut and the whole change management process, it can often be quite scary for financial institutions when they consider, like when they're reviewing a vendor like Coconut, for example, that their staff don't keep their calendars up to date at the moment, or if their staff wouldn't be the most receptive to new processes, for example. And this is why tip number 3 is so important. A clear communication strategy with staff is the key. So by highlighting the current pain points that would be eliminated by using the new solution, and then outlining the whole what's in it for me approach. And much like financial institutions out there, coastal communities started looking at Coconut because they realized, if I can have an experience, or if I can book a haircut online or book an appointment for a haircut online, why can't I book an appointment to speak with my financial advisor? So then fast forward to the implementation process. And one of the reasons that Coastal realized the value of Coconut so quickly was that their internal communication strategy was so clear and concise. And that's why this is a top priority and top tip for realizing the benefits of customer engagement tech today. Back to you, Eli.
All right, tip number 4, communicate clearly and often. So I would say communicating clearly and consistently is important for all human relationships. So just like how I'm training my toddler Fergus to finally put away all of his toys, or if it's us helping roll out a new piece of engagement tech, ensuring transparency about the process, what are the steps involved, what are the expectations, and then making it fun for those involved is key for retaining that training, for encouraging consistent action, and then keeping up successes after. So in this example, WeQ rolled out their engagement tech in layers. And they started by presenting to management, whether the benefits, how is this going to fit in with our operations, what operations need to be changed, and actually what is this going to look like through demonstrations. And once those folks were aligned and they bought in, then an internal drip campaign was launched to the rest of the staff to get people excited before implementation had even started. And they chose to do this in order to build momentum, excitement, so that when they were ready to flip that switch and get things rolling, the staff were ready and they weren't worried and concerned. And so a great example that Jeremy from WeQ provided to us was, prior to going live, they did an internal contest. And so they set everyone up with their own instance of Coconut across the entire branch network. So they had 3 days to schedule as many appointments as possible for each other, just internal appointments. Each appointment that was scheduled was an entry for a big branch party. And this gamification of the rollout resulted in, I think you mentioned 3,000 appointments. And it was a really fun way to train, get buy-in into the new process. And it was interesting because the WeQ leaders really felt that it was important for the full team to feel like a part of the rollout. It wasn't just being bestowed upon them from on high, because that helps make it successful. And those frontline individuals are absolutely key, because they're going to give you the best feedback as to how it's going. So we actually have a couple of examples. So these are from fairly recent rollouts. So on the left here, we have an example of what Motor City Credit Union did. They actually printed out with kind of the tropical theme playing up on our Coconut branding, which is great. They had these posters around their branch. And so when they had their members walk in, essentially it was showing them, you can just scan this QR code. If you'd like to book an appointment, it's as simple as this. They also took the opportunity, same with Parkview, to really lean in on the fun launch. So, you know, there were leis, palm trees, coconuts were decorated. I know Parkview did some fun internal stuff, clearly lots of great photo ops, but it's just an opportunity to build a little excitement, to do some fun things, and to start getting some clear and concise communication. And everyone's going to listen to someone who's wearing a lei. How could you ignore them? All right, back over to you, Stephen.
Love it. It might be a bit harder to do it with some of the other brands in the financial technology sphere. I think we're quite blessed that we've got the Coconut branding. It's easy to buy into. I'm not sure if some others out there might struggle with that, but it's important nonetheless. Okay, so our last tip today, I mentioned earlier how Coastal Community employed quite a clear communication strategy with staff to ease any concerns around a new system. But our last tip is more about external communication with your customers, members, and of course your prospects. And there's nothing worse, and I'm quite surprised when I hear this from some of our customers, but there's nothing worse than going through a vendor review process. And sorry, let me just outline that this isn't with Coconut, of course, but if they're going through a vendor review process and they're aligning all the resources internally to implement a new piece of technology, only for it then to gather dust on the shelf until the end of the contract term and it never really getting used. And that's why A, it's so important to take time selecting the right vendor, as we mentioned earlier, and also B, that your customers can easily access the tools that you've implemented. So thankfully, Coconut is a solution that you don't really have to wait months or years to realize the benefit of. Any chance I get, I always shout out to our implementation and customer success team, because they are superhuman and they work with you to kind of ensure that your customers, members, and prospects are going to take advantage of Coconut immediately by ensuring it's promoted in the right channels with effective call to actions, as well as your staff, as I mentioned earlier. So it's important to note here that the goals and success metrics will change over time. So what you use to measure success at the start of the rollout versus the ongoing success versus future growth constantly changes. And that's why we place so much importance on open lines of communication with our customers. I often say that your goals in January 2020 probably looked a lot different to your goals in December 2020. So just an example of how those goals could change, with maybe kind of a bit of an extreme example. So we have a couple of examples here actually of effective entry points in customer journeys. And the one we're going to start with here is Texas Regional Bank. And the reason I really like this is because it's an effective use of using direct links to staff calendars on a public sphere. So obviously we can share links over emails and things like that. So you can choose to have public or private sharing of these booking shortcuts. Another reason why I love this for Texas Regional Bank is that's actually a really effective use of iframe and Coconut within their website. So if you look here at the top, you can see that this appointment is going to be with Michelle Robinson, and we have the services that Michelle offers in the bottom within the iframe. So just really good integration of Coconut within that kind of client booking experience. And I suppose this is just one of the ways that you can display the Coconut client view. Others include popping it out as an external link, or having a light box that like it'll pop up on your website as well. So underneath the example of Texas Regional Bank, and we're not going to pop out into all the websites here, but just wanted to quickly show you that one. We have Citadel Credit Union. And here's a wonderful kind of clear call to action on their homepage. And one of the things I like about this call to action in particular is the title of Banking Together on Your Schedule. Because as a customer or a member using Coconut, I think you're really empowered to kind of decide what works for you in terms of time, in terms of where you're meeting, and in terms of how you want to engage as well. So liking that call out there from Citadel. And then last but certainly not least, my good friends at Arvis Bank in Arkansas. So they're utilizing their strong LinkedIn presence and multi-channel approach to promote appointment scheduling, which we can see here. And as you can see in the kind of image, the client view, I think, in my opinion, actually looks better on a mobile device as well. So if you have time, anyone on the line today who isn't a current customer of Coconut, go over and check out some of our current customers and check out their experiences. So these are all obviously wonderful examples of multi-channel execution plans and our customer and kind of member engagement path. So at Coconut, we consistently adapt these paths based on feedback from our current customers and what we foresee as needs in the customer engagement market today. So with that, I'll thank you very much, and I'll pass back over to Eli.
Perfect, thank you. So just before we close off, we did have one question that was sent to us as panelists, and this is a question for you, Stephen. Okay, so appointments work great for future questions or things that can wait. But what are your recommendations to help answer ad hoc questions? So the example is someone wants to meet quickly to see the best rate that they can get, like on a car loan. What would you sort of recommend?
Okay, so that's interesting, because I suppose as an organization in Coconut, we are quite focused on having engagements in the future, setting appointments, and then allowing your staff to prepare for those appointments. The benefit being that they know who's going to walk in that door of the day, or who's going to be meeting them on the Zoom call or Teams call or whatever it may be. But what a lot of financial institutions do today for some of those immediate concerns are obviously the ones we come to expect: calling someone up on the phone, getting someone through a like a chatbot functionality, which I personally wouldn't be the biggest fan of. And then maybe after that, once they've kind of exhausted the chatbot, they connect through chat to maybe a representative at the bank. So there are kind of a couple of options that exist today with other vendors. Interestingly, though, and hopefully I can say this, we are releasing our own kind of video and virtual banking platform today. And what that will allow is that will allow your customers, prospects, your members to have immediate conversations with staff at your financial institution. So if they are on chat or if they want to meet with someone directly, they can go into what we would call a virtual queue, and your staff, whether it be in a contact center or your staff in a branch, can then handle those engagements through our Coconut Connect video platform. So a little bit of plug for what's coming in a couple of weeks with Coconut.
Excellent. Okay. So that was it for questions. So thank you everyone for joining today. We really hope that these real life examples from real life bank and credit unions were helpful to illustrate why customer engagement tech really is important, and why those financial institutions chose to invest. So if you'd like some more information, of course, visit coconutsoftware.com. You can join in the conversation on all of our social media accounts. And then if it would be helpful, we can certainly send you a copy of this deck. Just shoot us an email to marketing@coconutsoftware.com, and we will certainly get that to you. So with that, you get 3 minutes back in your time and your schedule. We look forward to hearing from you, and let us know if you have any questions. Cheers.